we got a great guest. Kevin Schmiesing is on the line with us. He is a lectures on church history at Mount St. Mary's Seminary, that is, and School of Theology in Cincinnati. Plus, he's a co-host of the Catholic History Trek podcast and YouTube series. And Kevin joins us today to talk about his book that Bonnie is holding right now, Catholic Pilgrimage Through American History. Thanks so much for being with us, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin, Bonnie. Good to be with you. Even though it does appear I'm somewhat underdressed for the occasion.
That's all right. Maybe next time. Well, let's get into it. We often think Catholic history is maybe focused on the Holy Land or Rome, but the reality is that our history continues to grow in every land where the good news is shared. Maybe if you could talk about that and about what attracted you to church history in the first place.
Sure. Well, I like this expression that history continues to grow. It grows because time marches on and there's new history being created all the time. It also grows because we continue to explore the past, to do research and to discover more about what's happened in our past. So you're right that church history is not restricted to the American story. The Catholic Church is truly Catholic, universal. And so there's history going on all over the place, and that history continues to be made even as we speak. What attracted me to this subject? Well, I think probably the same thing that attracts most people who enjoy history, and that is they like stories, right? I like the stories in history. History can be looked at really as a collection of stories. My love for history started early on. Someone gave me a copy of Butler's Lives of the Saints when I was a kid. And that became part of my daily routine, was reading a life of a saint. And I think that's probably also part of the catalyst for what attracted me to church history, because I began to see the saints not just as models of holiness, which of course they are, but also as figures in history, as being shaped by history and also as shaping history themselves. So been interested in history generally, in church history, and in American Catholic history in particular for a very long time.
Good for you. It's really just such an enlivening experience, and you learn so much even about your present by going back. And what I really enjoyed about this is that you took us to about 24 different sites and events, really, which touch on our Catholic past right here in the United States. How did you decide which ones to select?
Well, I wish I could say I had a sophisticated system for selecting the topics for those chapters. I would be lying if I said I did. It really goes back to my first answer, which is it's all about the stories. I've been collecting stories from American Catholic history for 25 or 30 years, and this book was really just a way to share the stories that I was most interested in, that I thought were most fascinating or important or edifying or whatever the case may be. So it's a vehicle for sharing those stories, and my hope is that other people will be interested in some of the same kinds of stories that I am. With that said, there was some method to the madness in the sense that I did try to be comprehensive, not meaning that I cover everything, but comprehensive both geographically and chronologically. So as the book unfolded, as I continued to write chapters, I thought, okay, maybe I need something on the West Coast or in the South or on the East Coast. And the result is that I do take you all across the United States, from Alaska to Florida, New York and Massachusetts as well as represented, all the way out to California and everywhere in between. And also chronologically, that I wanted to represent the history as it happened all over the course of the American Catholic experience. And so we start in Florida with St. Augustine way back in the 16th century. And the book ends, the final chapter is about Gene Kranz and the space program in the late 20th century. So again, we cover the beginning and the end and everything in between.
And talk about a little bit more, if you could, Kevin, the Catholic history in the United States, often tied to some conflicting times, some tumultuous times as well, and some anti-Catholic sentiment getting there. What are some of the things that kind of stand out for you as you looked back?
Yeah, that's true. There is a lot of conflict in American history, and any good storyteller will tell you that good stories often rely on conflict. There is some kind of conflict or some kind of tension in the story, and that's part of what makes it interesting. And that's certainly true in American Catholic history as well. You mentioned anti-Catholicism. That, I think, is one of the major components or major themes in the book. It pops up in a lot of the chapters. A couple of the chapters are focused on anti-Catholic events. For example, the Bedini riot in Cincinnati in the 1850s. And so this conflict between Protestants or other non-Catholic Americans and Catholics is one of those themes, but also a division or a tension that's still with us. The treatment or the status of minority groups, racial and ethnic minorities in American history. That also appears in American Catholic history, and a couple of the chapters look at those themes more in depth. One of those is about Venerable Augustus Tolton, who was the first Black Catholic priest in the United States. And another one is on the Wounded Knee Massacre, which talks about the relationship between Catholics and Native Americans. So those are some of the tensions and conflicts that you'll see highlighted or brought out in the course of these chapters in the book.
As unfortunate as it is, it's important for us to recognize those shortcomings that we've had in the past so that we're not doomed to repeat it, as is often the case. So thank you for calling that to our attention throughout our history. Definitely in the book does a great job of that. But in addition to the book, getting ready for this, I was really excited to find your podcast, which is called The Catholic History Trek. Super interesting, so congratulations on that. How can people find that, follow your work, and get a copy of the book?
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate hearing that someone's actually listening to the podcast, and especially that they're enjoying it. Scott and I enjoy putting that together. So that's a good place to start. If you want to follow my work, go to the podcast. It's Catholic History Trek, and it is available on all of the usual podcast outlets, Apple, Spotify, Google, and so forth. The book, I recommend, first of all, checking out your local Catholic gift shop or bookstore if you have one. It's great to support those folks, and they'll either have the book or they can order one. Also, AveMariaPress.com. You can order it from the publisher directly. And, of course, it's also available on all the usual online outlets, Amazon and Barnes & Noble and so forth.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. And thanks so much for being with us. This is a perfect fit to kick off Independence Day weekend, a journey through our history, our Catholic history here in the United States. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.